$459,000. That's what these three Washington quarters were worth to collectors, and one of them sold for an astonishing $257,000. On its own, the shocking part? None of these coins look rare at first glance. Hidden among ordinary quarters are details that most people miss completely. Stay with us, because the final coin in this countdown is the discovery that stunned even experienced collectors. Let's begin with coin number 1. The album had not been opened in years. Its pages were worn at the edges, carrying the faint scent of old paper and forgotten memories. As each plastic sleeve turned, rows of familiar coins appeared one after another, silent witnesses to decades of American life. Then, among dozens of ordinary-looking quarters, one coin caused a collector to pause. It looked almost identical to the others, yet something about it felt different. What seemed like a common piece of pocket change would eventually become one of the most sought-after examples of its kind. That coin was the Liberty Washington $quarter dated 1979, struck without a mint mark. To most people, it was simply another quarter. Millions passed through cash registers, vending machines, and wallets across America. Yet collectors understand that every coin carries a story far greater than its face value. The absence of a mint mark identifies this piece as having been produced at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not place mint marks on quarters during that era. To understand this coin, it helps to step back into America in 1979. The nation was entering a new decade, filled with economic uncertainty, technological change, and shifting cultural trends. Americans still relied heavily on cash for everyday purchases. Quarters were among the hardest-working coins in circulation, constantly moving from hand to hand. Most became worn, scratched, and eventually forgotten. Few people imagined that some would survive in remarkable condition. The Washington quarter itself had already become an American icon. First introduced in 1932 to honor George Washington, the design reflected both national pride and artistic tradition. On the obverse, Washington's portrait projected dignity and stability. On the reverse, the eagle symbolized strength and independence. Every detail was carefully crafted to communicate values that generations of Americans recognized instantly. Collectors often become fascinated by coins like the 1979 quarter because they represent everyday history. Unlike rare gold pieces locked away in vaults, these coins traveled through real lives. They bought lunches, paid tolls, and sat forgotten in dresser drawers. Each surviving example carries traces of the era in which it circulated. As interest in modern coin collecting grew, enthusiasts began studying subtle differences between seemingly identical quarters. They searched for exceptional strikes, unusual die varieties, and examples that escaped circulation entirely, while no famous major error defines the 1979 Philadelphia quarter. Collectors carefully inspect surfaces, luster, strike quality, and overall preservation. These characteristics can dramatically separate an ordinary specimen from an extraordinary one. Condition becomes the defining factor. A quarter that spent decades in circulation may show heavy wear, while a carefully preserved example can retain the original brilliance it possessed. On the day it left the mint, professional grading helps authenticate these qualities, giving collectors confidence in a coin's state of preservation. This is where the story becomes remarkable. The finest known examples of the 1979 no mint mark Washington quarter have attracted intense collector attention. At the highest levels of preservation, one exceptional specimen achieved a value of approximately $87,000. The number itself is impressive, but it represents something deeper than money. It reflects rarity of condition, historical survival, authenticity, and the passion of collectors determined to preserve a small piece of American heritage. Perhaps that is the enduring appeal of this quarter. It reminds us that history does not exist only in museums or famous landmarks. Sometimes it survives quietly inside an old album, a family collection, or a forgotten box of coins. And as our journey continues to the next coin, another ordinary object will reveal how extraordinary stories can remain hidden in plain sight. The search started with a box of inherited coins spread across a dining room table. Most of the pieces were exactly what collectors expect to find: well-circulated coins with years of wear and little mystery attached to them. But while comparing several Washington quarters side by side, one example kept drawing attention. Nothing about it seemed dramatic at first glance. Yet experienced collectors know that the most interesting discoveries rarely announce themselves immediately. Sometimes the evidence only appears after careful examination. As the investigation continued, the date became the first important clue. This was a Liberty Washington $quarter, struck in 1972 with no mint mark. That absence tells an important story. During this period, quarters produced at the Philadelphia Mint typically carried no mint mark, making identification dependent on understanding the practices of the era. What appeared ordinary suddenly became part of a much larger historical picture. The next question was simple. What was happening in America when this coin entered circulation? In 1972, the United States was experiencing rapid social and technological change. The space program had recently captured worldwide attention. Major political events dominated headlines, and millions of Americans relied on coins for everyday transactions. Quarters flowed constantly through stores, restaurants, gas stations, and banks. Most completed their journey unnoticed. But a small number survived in conditions that would later attract serious collector interest. Looking closer at the design provides another piece of evidence. The portrait of George Washington on the obverse was based on the work of sculptor John Flanagan, whose goal was to create a dignified and enduring image of America's first president. On the reverse, the eagle stands with wings spread, clutching arrows and olive branches. The symbolism is deliberate, representing both strength and peace. Decades after its release, collectors still admire how effectively the design communicates those ideals. When specialists evaluate a 1972 Philadelphia quarter, they begin searching for characteristics that separate one example from thousands of others. Strike quality becomes important. Are the details sharp? Does the coin retain its original luster? Have contact marks diminished its appearance? Collectors often compare multiple examples under magnification, looking for subtle differences that casual observers would never notice. Another clue emerges from preservation. Many 1972 quarters spent years in circulation, accumulating scratches, wear, and discoloration. Finding one with exceptional surfaces is increasingly difficult because time naturally works against survival. This reality explains why experienced collectors often spend years upgrading examples in their collections, searching for a specimen that stands above the rest. Interest in the coin grew as grading standards became more refined. Auction specialists and professional numismatists began recognizing that truly elite examples were far scarcer than most people assumed. While ordinary circulated pieces remained common, the finest preserved survivors occupied a completely different category. Collectors competing for top registry quality. Coins pushed attention toward the very best examples available. Eventually, the investigation reached its conclusion. The highest known example of the 1972 no mint mark Washington quarter achieved an extraordinary value of approximately $15,000. That figure was not created by age alone. It reflected exceptional preservation, professional authentication, collector demand, and the challenge of finding another example of comparable quality. What makes this quarter memorable is not simply the price attached to it. It is the reminder that careful observation can transform an overlooked object into an important historical artifact. And as our documentary moves to the final coin, the evidence will lead us to a piece whose story reaches even deeper into America's numismatic legacy. Imagine a small coin resting in the palm of a grandparent before being handed to a child. Years pass. The child grows older, the world changes, and that same coin quietly remains. It survives family moves, changing generations, and countless moments that are never recorded in history books. Few objects travel through time so effortlessly. Fewer still become symbols of an entire nation's memory. Among collectors, one particular quarter would eventually earn special admiration not because of where it traveled, but because of what it represented. That coin is the Liberty Washington Bicentennial $quarter, dated 1976 with no mint mark, identifying it as a Philadelphia issue. Unlike ordinary Washington quarters, this piece was created to commemorate the 200th anniversary of American independence. It was more than a circulating coin. It was a national tribute placed directly into the hands of millions of Americans during a historic celebration. The United States of 1976 was reflecting on 2 centuries of history. Across the country, Communities organized parades, exhibitions, and patriotic events marking the bicentennial. Citizens looked back on the nation's founding while imagining its future. The quarter became part of that celebration. Every transaction offered a reminder of a milestone that connected generations separated by 200 years. Its design reflected that purpose beautifully. The familiar portrait of George Washington remained on the obverse, preserving continuity with earlier quarters. The reverse, however, introduced something entirely different. Designed by Jack L.R., it featured a colonial drummer standing beside a victory torch surrounded by 13 stars, representing the original colonies. The image captured both sacrifice and hope. Rather than simply showing a historical figure, it told a story of a nation finding its identity. Many collectors remember the first time they noticed the drummer boy design. Some discovered it in pocket change. Others found it inside coin folders assembled by parents or grandparents. For many families, bicentennial quarters became keepsakes rather than spending money. They were often saved because they felt different, connected to a specific moment in American history that people wanted to remember. As the years passed, collectors began examining these quarters more carefully. They looked for strong strikes, clean surfaces, original luster, and exceptional preservation. Since Philadelphia examples carried no mint mark, identifying quality required close attention to detail, rather than a simple letter beneath the date. Small differences in condition could dramatically affect collector interest. The appeal of the bicentennial quarter extended beyond technical grading. Numismatists appreciated how the coin combined historical commemoration with circulating coinage. It served a practical purpose while also preserving a national story. That combination gave the coin a lasting place in American numismatic culture, long after the celebrations of 1976 had ended. Eventually, auction specialists and professional graders recognized that a tiny number of surviving examples stood far above the rest. These quarters displayed extraordinary preservation, remarkable eye appeal, and a level of quality rarely seen among coins that were originally produced for everyday use. Demand intensified as collectors competed to own the finest known specimens. The result was remarkable. One of the highest graded known examples achieved a value of approximately $257,000. Yet, that figure represents far more than a price. It reflects historical significance, authenticity, exceptional preservation, collector dedication, and the enduring power of a design that commemorated an important chapter of American history. As our journey concludes, these three quarters remind us that collecting is not simply about finding valuable coins. It is about preserving stories. History often survives in the smallest objects, inside old albums, forgotten collections, and even ordinary pocket change. The next overlooked coin you encounter may not just be currency. It may be a connection to another generation, another era, and another story waiting to be discovered. If you enjoy uncovering hidden pieces of history, subscribe and continue exploring the remarkable world of coins with us.